The Vorthak had been hunting across the galaxy for over 10,000 years. It was death given form, a creature born from the nightmares of evolution itself. Standing 12 feet tall on 6 powerful legs, its obsidian carapace gleamed like polished metal under the light of dying stars. 4 arms ended in claws that could slice through battle armor like paper, and its elongated skull housed a brain that calculated the most efficient ways to kill every living thing it encountered. The creature's reputation preceded it across 17 star systems. Entire worlds had gone silent after the Vorthak arrived. The Zellan Empire, masters of energy weapons and plasma technology, had thrown their entire military might against it. Their fleets turned to floating debris in the void. The crystalline Ashanti, beings of pure thought and energy manipulation, had tried to contain it with psychic barriers. Their homeworld now orbited as glowing dust around their sun. On the mining station, Kepler 442, the warning came too late. Commander Rylak, a veteran Centaurian with blue-scaled skin and 4 eyes that had seen countless battles, received the transmission just as proximity alarms began screaming throughout the facility. "All stations, this is Priority Alpha Alert," the message crackled through damaged communication arrays. "The Vorthak has breached the outer rim. Evacuation protocols are in effect immediately. Do not attempt to fight. I repeat, do not attempt to fight." But there was nowhere to run. Kepler 442 was a deep space mining operation, harvesting rare metals from asteroid fields light years from the nearest inhabited system. The evacuation ships had been sent to the inner colonies 3 weeks ago for routine maintenance. The skeleton crew of 200 beings from a dozen different species were trapped with nothing but mining equipment and a few outdated security drones. Through the reinforced transparasteel windows of the command center, they watched it arrive. The Vorthak's ship was unlike anything in known space, a living construct that pulsed with veins of bioluminescent energy. It didn't dock so much as penetrate the station's hull, extending tendrils that burrowed through metal and carbon fiber like they were soft clay. The creature emerged in Bay 7, and the killing began immediately. The automated defense systems activated, sending waves of plasma bolts toward the intruder. The Vorthak moved like liquid shadow, its multiple limbs carrying it across walls and ceiling with impossible grace. Security cameras captured glimpses of destruction, claws rending through bulkheads, beings fleeing in terror, sparks cascading as power systems failed. Engineer Thys, an insectoid klaxon with natural armor plating, tried to seal himself in the reactor chamber. The Vorthak tore through the blast doors in seconds, its claws leaving glowing marks in the reinforced metal. Thys's final transmission was cut short by a sound that would haunt the survivors' dreams, the wet crunch of chitin being crushed like eggshells. Dr. Venna, the station's chief medical officer and member of the aquatic Merdon species, attempted to hide in the medical bay's surgical suite. She activated every sterilization protocol, hoping the radiation might slow the creature down. Instead, she watched in horror as the Vorthak absorbed the deadly energy, its carapace glowing brighter as it fed on the radiation that should have killed it. The creature's hunting pattern was methodical and terrifying. It seemed to sense the location of every living being on the station, moving through the corridors with purpose that spoke of an intelligence far beyond mere animal cunning. It didn't just kill, it studied each victim, learning from their defensive strategies, adapting to their technologies. In the command center, the remaining crew watched their colleagues die one by one through security feeds that flickered and died as the Vorthak destroyed each camera. Commander Rylak tried to maintain order, but panic was setting in. The Torthan engineers were clicking their mandibles in distress patterns that filled the air with nervous energy. The silicon-based Kristans were shifting through spectrum colors that indicated pure terror. "Sir," Communications Officer Zeph, a young humanoid from the Tau Ceti system, reported with a shaking voice. "I'm reading 15 life signs remaining. The creature is moving toward Section C. That was where the civilians were hiding. The mining families, the support staff, the children who weren't supposed to be in danger this far from the galaxy's conflict zones. Rylak made a decision that went against every protocol in the book. "Open channel to all stations," he ordered. "This is Commander Rylak. Anyone who can hear this transmission, make noise. Lots of it. Draw the creature toward the command center. We might not be able to stop it, but we can buy the civilians time to reach the emergency pods." It was a desperate plan, and everyone knew it wouldn't work. The emergency pods were short-range vessels designed for local system evacuation. Even if the civilians reached them, they would simply die slowly in the void instead of quickly under the Vorthak's claws. But it was the only choice they had left. The crew began activating every system they could access: alarms, communication arrays, mining equipment, even the station's entertainment systems. The noise was deafening, a cacophony that echoed through the metal corridors like a dying whale's song. And incredibly, it worked. The Vorthak paused in its methodical hunt and began moving toward the command center. Through the security feeds, they watched it approach. The creature moved differently now, more cautiously, as if it recognized that its prey had stopped running and started fighting back. When it reached the sealed blast doors of the command center, it didn't immediately tear through them. Instead, it seemed to study the barrier, running its claws along the metal in patterns that almost looked like writing. "What's it doing?" Zeph whispered. Rylak's 4 eyes focused on the main screen. He had seen this behavior before, in reports from other worlds. "It's learning about us, how we think, how we build, how we defend ourselves. Every species it encounters makes it smarter." The blast doors began to glow as the Vorthak's claws heated to temperatures that could melt titanium. Slowly, deliberately, it carved through the barrier like an artist working on a masterpiece. The crew could hear it breathing on the other side, a sound like steam escaping from broken pipes, mixed with something that might have been laughter. When the doors finally gave way, the Vorthak flowed into the command center like liquid death. Up close, it was even more terrifying than the reports had suggested. Its carapace bore scars from 1,000 battles, each one a testament to another species' final, futile resistance. Its multiple eyes glowed with an intelligence that was both alien and absolutely hostile to all life. The creature paused, scanning the command crew with what seemed like curiosity. For a moment that stretched like eternity, predator and prey regarded each other across the sparking ruins of the control room. Then the Vorthak began to move, and the last defenders of Kepler 442 prepared to join their colleagues in death. But death didn't come quickly. The creature seemed to savor this final hunt, moving slowly among the crew, studying each species' fear responses, learning how different beings faced their end. It was conducting an experiment, gathering data that would make it an even more efficient killer when it encountered these species again. Commander Rylak, drawing on reserves of courage that surprised even himself, stepped forward. "Why?" he asked in the common trade language. "Why do you do this? What do you gain from all this death?" The Vorthak tilted its massive head, and when it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone mixed with screaming wind. "I perfect myself through the consumption of imperfection. Each species teaches me new ways to be more than I was. You will teach me how the Centaurians die, and I will become stronger." The creature raised one massive claw, positioning it above Rylak's head with surgical precision. Around the command center, the remaining crew closed their eyes or focused on final prayers to gods who seemed very far away. The Vorthak savored the moment, feeding on their terror as much as it would soon feed on their flesh. And in that moment of absolute despair, with death hovering inches away from the last free beings in this corner of space, something impossible happened. A soft chime echoed through the command center's speakers, the sound of an incoming transmission request. The Vorthak paused, its claw still raised. In 10,000 years of hunting, nothing had ever interrupted its kills. The creature's multiple eyes focused on the communication console with something that might have been confusion. "This is the cargo vessel Lucky Break, requesting permission to dock," came a voice in strangely accented common tongue. "We've got emergency supplies for Kepler 442, and our pilot could really use a bathroom break. Also, is everything okay over there? Your outer hull looks like it got into a fight with a very angry asteroid." The voice was cheerful, casual, completely oblivious to the nightmare that had consumed the station. Through the command center's cracked viewports, they could see a small, battered ship approaching the docking bay. Its design was unfamiliar, not matching any known spacefaring civilization's aesthetic. The vessel looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and optimistic engineering, held together by faith and what appeared to be actual duct tape. The Vorthak lowered its claw slowly, its attention fully focused on this unexpected development. In all its millennia of existence, nothing had ever approached one of its hunting grounds voluntarily. The creature's tactical mind processed this new variable, calculating threats and opportunities with predatory efficiency. Commander Rylak, still alive by the narrowest of margins, managed to activate his communication unit with shaking hands. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Rylak of Kepler 442. You need to leave this system immediately. We are under attack by a hostile entity. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to dock." The cheerful voice returned, now tinged with concern. "Hostile entity? Well, that doesn't sound good at all. How hostile are we talking here? Because I've dealt with some pretty grumpy customers in my time, and most problems can be solved with the right combination of patience and snack foods." The Vorthak made a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could freeze blood and crack stone. This new prey was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and either way it would provide an interesting diversion from the methodical slaughter. The creature began moving toward the docking bay, its hunt temporarily diverted by curiosity about this strange new species. As the unknown vessel completed its docking procedure with the casual efficiency of experienced space travelers, the survivors in the command center could only watch in horror and amazement. Whatever was aboard that ship was about to become the Vorthak's next victim, but their intervention had bought precious time. In the cargo bay, the airlock began to cycle, and the Vorthak positioned itself in the shadows, ready to study this new prey before consuming it. The creature's anticipation was almost palpable as it prepared to add another species to its vast catalog of conquered civilizations. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure, and into the nightmare stepped something that would change everything. The being that emerged from the airlock was unlike anything the Vorthak had encountered in its 10 millennia of hunting. It stood upright on two legs, relatively small at just under 6 feet in height, with pale pink skin and a peculiar arrangement of facial features that seemed almost randomly assembled. Thin hair covered the top of its head in an unruly brown mess, and its clothing appeared to be a mixture of practical work gear and items that served no obvious survival function. What struck the Vorthak as most unusual was the creature's behavior. It showed no fear, no awareness of danger, no instinctive prey response. Instead, it looked around the damaged cargo bay with what appeared to be professional curiosity, making small clicking sounds with its tongue as it surveyed the destruction. "Well, that's definitely not normal wear and tear," the creature said to itself, crouching down to examine claw marks in the metal deck plating. "These gouges go pretty deep. Whatever made these must be seriously strong." It stood up, brushing dust off its knees, and called out to the empty bay. "Hello? Anyone around? I've got your supply delivery, plus some extra goodies I picked up from the Centauri trading post." The Vorthak remained hidden in the shadows, studying this new prey with growing confusion. Every species it had encountered showed immediate recognition of danger when entering a compromised environment. Their survival instincts screamed warnings about blood scents, damaged structures, and the general wrongness that accompanied the presence of an apex predator. But this creature seemed completely oblivious to all of these signals. The being, which the Vorthak's vast mental catalog suggested might be something called a human from the galactic rim territories, began unloading cargo containers from its ship. It worked with efficient movements, stacking supply crates and humming what sounded like some sort of vocalization pattern. Every few minutes, it would pause and call out again. "I know someone's here because the docking bay accepted my ship," the human continued conversationally. "And the life support systems are working fine, so you're not all dead. Maybe you're dealing with some kind of emergency. If you need help, just give me a shout. I've got medical supplies, emergency rations, and some really good coffee that I'm willing to share." The Vorthak's tactical mind processed this information with growing bewilderment. The creature was offering aid to potential prey. This behavior pattern didn't exist in any of the predator's vast databases of conquered species. Even the most cooperative civilizations showed self-preservation instincts when entering dangerous situations. But this human seemed genuinely concerned about the welfare of beings it had never met. Through the cargo bay's internal sensors, the Vorthak watched as the human completed its unloading and began examining the damage more closely. The creature pulled out a small scanning device and ran it over the claw marks, making interested sounds as data appeared on the device's display. "These are really interesting," the human muttered, apparently talking to itself. The cutting pattern suggests multiple appendages working in coordination, and the metal displacement indicates tremendous force applied with surgical precision. Whatever made these is intelligent, powerful, and probably pretty frustrated about something. The human paused, looking up from its scanner with what appeared to be sudden understanding. "Oh," it said quietly. "You're still here, aren't you? That's why everyone's hiding. You're scared of something big and dangerous that's loose on the station?" The creature looked around the bay again, this time with obvious concern rather than curiosity. "Well, that's not good. Everyone must be terrified." The human shouldered a large pack and picked up several supply containers. "Don't worry, I'll find everyone and make sure they're safe. I've dealt with dangerous situations before." The Vorthak found itself experiencing something entirely new, confusion bordering on intellectual paralysis. This prey was not only refusing to flee, it was actively seeking out other prey to protect them. The behavior was so far outside the creature's understanding that its hunting protocols couldn't formulate an appropriate response. As the human left the cargo bay and began moving through the station's corridors, the Vorthak followed at a distance, studying this unprecedented behavior. The creature moved through the damaged sections with obvious concern, calling out in a gentle voice. "Hello? This is Captain Sarah Chen from the cargo vessel Lucky Break. I have emergency supplies and I'm here to help. If you're hiding, that's smart, but I need to know if anyone's injured or trapped." The human's voice carried genuine warmth and concern, emotional frequencies that the Vorthak had never heard directed toward potential victims. In the creature's experience, beings either fought with desperate fury or cowered in terror. They didn't seek out danger to help strangers. Through the station's damaged communication system, Commander Rylak's voice crackled weakly. "Human vessel, you need to evacuate immediately. The entity that attacked our station is extremely dangerous. It has killed most of our crew and is still aboard." The human paused in a corridor junction, looking up at a damaged speaker grill. "How many survivors are there? And do you know where the dangerous entity is right now?" 15 survivors in scattered locations. The entity was in the command center when you arrived, but its current position is unknown. Please, you must leave while you still can." The human was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a tone the Vorthak had never heard before. Determination mixed with compassion. "Commander Rylak, right? I'm not leaving 15 people to die. I've got medical supplies, emergency rations, and my ship can carry about 20 people if we really pack them in. We're going to get everyone out of here. The Vorthak's confusion deepened into something approaching cognitive dissonance. This behavior was not just unprecedented, it was counterproductive to survival. The logical response would be to flee immediately, preserving the individual's genetic material for future reproduction. Instead, this human was voluntarily placing itself in danger to save unrelated beings from species it had probably never encountered before. Following the human through the station's corridors, the Vorthak observed behavior patterns that defied every model of biological survival it had developed over millennia of studying prey species. When the human encountered the body of Engineer Thys, she stopped and carefully covered the Klaxon's remains with an emergency blanket, speaking quiet words that seemed to serve no practical purpose. "I'm sorry this happened to you," the human said softly. "No one should die alone and afraid. I promise I'll get your friends to safety." The creature was speaking to dead prey, expressing emotional responses that served no evolutionary advantage. The Vorthak's vast intellect struggled to process this information. In its experience, death was simply the end of a hunt. Prey either survived or was consumed. There was no middle ground, no emotional attachment to the fate of other beings. The human continued through the station, leaving supply caches at strategic locations and using her communication device to coordinate with the survivors. Her voice remained calm and reassuring even as she discovered more evidence of the Vorthak's hunting. "Okay, I've found a route to the emergency pods that avoids the most damaged sections," she reported to Commander Rylak. "I'm going to set up supply stations along the way, and then we'll move everyone in small groups. The dangerous entity seems to be staying in the central sections, so if we're careful and quiet, we should be able to avoid it." The Vorthak realized that the human was demonstrating tactical planning abilities that rivaled its own. She was analyzing the station's layout, predicting movement patterns, and developing evacuation strategies with impressive efficiency. But unlike the creature's own tactical thinking, the human's plans were designed to preserve life rather than extinguish it. This cognitive dissonance became even more pronounced when the human encountered Dr. Venna, the Merdan medical officer, trapped in a collapsed section of the medical bay. The aquatic being was conscious but pinned under debris, slowly dehydrating as her environmental suit leaked precious moisture. "Hey there," the human said gently, squeezing through the twisted metal to reach the trapped doctor. "I'm Sarah. I'm here to help. What's your species biology like? I need to know how to treat you safely." Dr. Venna's speech was weak but audible. "Merdan, require high humidity, salt water for extended periods, environmental suit breach." The human immediately began working to free the doctor while maintaining a constant stream of reassuring conversation. "Okay, I've got emergency medical supplies that should work with aquatic biologies. The important thing is to stay calm and keep talking to me. What's your name?" "Venna." "Chief Medical Officer." "Great to meet you, Venna. I'm going to get you out of here and back to your people. Do you have family on the station?" As the human worked to free Dr. Venna, the Vorthak watched from the shadows with growing bewilderment. The creature was risking its own safety to save a being from a completely different species, and more incomprehensibly, it was engaging in social bonding behaviors with its rescue target. The conversation served no tactical purpose that the Vorthak could identify, yet the human maintained it continuously. "There we go," the human said, as she carefully lifted the debris pinning Dr. Venna. "Your suit's pretty damaged, but I've got emergency patches that should hold until we can get you to proper medical facilities." The repair process took several minutes, during which the human demonstrated knowledge of multiple species' biological requirements and advanced medical techniques. The Vorthak's databases indicated that such cross-species medical knowledge typically required decades of study, yet this human appeared to be relatively young by her species' standards. "How do you know Merdan physiology?" Dr. Venna asked weakly as the human sealed the environmental suit breeches. I spend a lot of time in mixed species trade stations, the human explained while checking the seal integrity. You pick up medical knowledge pretty quickly when you're responsible for cargo runs that might take you anywhere in the galaxy. Plus, I like learning about different species. Everyone has something interesting to teach if you're willing to listen. The Vorthak found itself analyzing this response with intense focus. The human collected knowledge not for tactical advantages or survival necessities, but apparently for the simple pleasure of understanding other beings. This behavior pattern was so foreign to the creature's experience that it challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligent life. After stabilizing Dr. Venna's condition, the human helped the aquatic being move slowly toward one of the supply stations she had established. The process was inefficient from a tactical standpoint. The human could have moved much faster alone, but she maintained a pace that accommodated the injured doctor's limitations. The others will be so relieved to see you, the human said as they moved through the damaged corridors. Commander Rylak mentioned that several crew members were asking about you. You must be pretty important to them. They are. My friends, Dr. Venna managed. We have worked together, for many years. That's wonderful. It's obvious they care about you a lot. Don't worry, we'll get you back to them soon. The Vorthak followed this slow procession with growing cognitive strain. The human's behavior was not just altruistic, it was actively counterproductive to her own survival. She was expending energy, exposing herself to danger, and reducing her mobility to save a being that offered no apparent reciprocal value. Yet she seemed genuinely happy to be doing so. When they reached the supply station, the human made Dr. Venna as comfortable as possible and provided additional medical supplies. I'm going to continue gathering survivors, she explained. There's food, water, and emergency medical equipment here. Commander Rylak knows your location, so help will be coming soon. Dr. Venna grasped the human's hand with surprising strength. Why are you risking yourself for strangers? The human seemed surprised by the question. Because you needed help, and I could provide it. That's reason enough, isn't it? The simplicity of this response created what could only be described as a system crash in the Vorthak's tactical processing centers. The human's behavior was based on principles that existed outside any survival framework the creature could comprehend. She helped because help was needed, without calculating cost-benefit ratios or evolutionary advantages. As the human continued her rescue operations, the Vorthak found itself following her movements with something approaching fascination. Each encounter with trapped or hidden survivors revealed new aspects of her incomprehensible behavior patterns. She shared her food with hungry beings, offered comfort to those in shock, and maintained optimism even in the face of obvious danger. The creature's confusion reached a critical threshold when the human encountered a group of civilian families huddled in a storage compartment. Among them were several juvenile beings, offspring too young to contribute to survival efforts, representing nothing but liability in a dangerous situation. Hey, everyone, the human said gently as she opened the storage compartment. I'm Sarah, and I'm here to get you somewhere safe. I know you're scared, but everything's going to be okay. The civilian families included representatives from 4 different species, including several juveniles who began vocalizing distress calls at the sight of an unknown being. Rather than showing irritation at the noise, which could potentially attract the attention of the dangerous entity, the human immediately focused on calming the young ones. It's okay, little ones, she said softly, producing small wrapped items from her pack. These are called candy bars. They're safe for most carbon-based life forms, and they taste pretty good. Would you like to try one? The Vorthak watched in absolute bewilderment as the human distributed food items to juvenile beings that served no survival function. She was depleting her own resources to provide comfort to the weakest members of the group, behavior that violated every principle of efficient resource management. But the effect was immediately apparent. The juveniles calmed down, their distress calls fading to curious chirps and clicks as they examined the unfamiliar food. The adult civilians visibly relaxed as their offspring showed signs of contentment. "There we go," the human said with obvious satisfaction. "Now, I need to get everyone to the emergency pods. But we're going to do it slowly and carefully. Does anyone here have mobility issues or special environmental needs?" As the human organized the evacuation of the civilian group, the Vorthak realized that its fundamental understanding of intelligent life might be flawed. Everything it had learned about biological behavior suggested that beings prioritized their own survival above all else. Cooperation existed only when it provided mutual benefits, and altruism was a temporary aberration that evolution eventually eliminated. But this human was demonstrating sustained altruistic behavior that appeared to be not just instinctive, but intentional. She was making conscious choices to help others at personal cost, and these choices seemed to bring her genuine satisfaction. The evacuation process took over an hour, during which the human maintained constant vigilance for threats while simultaneously keeping the group's morale stable. She told stories to distract the juveniles, helped elderly beings navigate damaged sections, and repeatedly reassured everyone that they would reach safety. When they finally arrived at the emergency pod bay, the human began the complex process of loading multiple species with different environmental requirements into escape vehicles designed for standard humanoid biology. "Okay, this pod's life support system can be adjusted for aquatic species," she explained to Dr. Venna. "And this one has environmental controls that should work for silicon-based life forms. The key is making sure everyone has what they need for the journey to the nearest inhabited system." Commander Rylak's voice crackled through the communication system. "Sarah, you need to launch the pods immediately. Our sensors show the entity moving toward your location. You've done more than enough. Please escape while you can." The human paused in her loading activities, looking around the pod bay at the survivors she had gathered. The Vorthak could sense her internal conflict, self-preservation instincts warring with her apparent compulsion to help others. "How many more survivors are there?" she asked. "3 more groups, scattered throughout the station. But Sarah, there's no time. The entity moves too fast, and it's actively hunting. You can't save everyone." The human was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a determination that the Vorthak found both admirable and completely illogical. "Commander, I'm going to get the pods launched with the survivors we have, but I'm not leaving the rest behind. 3 more groups means maybe a dozen more people. That's not acceptable losses. That's people with names and families and dreams." "I'm going back for them." The Vorthak's confusion crystallized into something approaching understanding. The human's behavior wasn't random or aberrational. It was based on a consistent philosophical framework that valued all intelligent life equally, regardless of species, utility, or survival probability. She wasn't calculating the mathematical optimization of genetic preservation. She was operating from principles that transcended biological imperatives. As the emergency pods launched with their precious cargo of survivors, the human stood alone in the pod bay, checking her equipment and planning her route to reach the remaining trapped beings. The Vorthak realized that this was the moment when it should strike. The prey was isolated, focused on other tasks, and completely unaware of the predator's presence. But for the first time in 10,000 years of hunting, the Vorthak hesitated. This human represented something unprecedented, a form of intelligence that operated outside the predator-prey paradigm that defined the creature's existence. Consuming her would provide biological resources, but it would also eliminate a phenomenon that the Vorthak's vast intellect found profoundly puzzling. The creature's moment of hesitation stretched longer as it watched the human prepare for what was essentially a suicide mission. She was going back into danger to save beings she didn't know, from species she'd never encountered, with no expectation of reward or recognition. The behavior was so fundamentally different from everything the Vorthak understood about life that it created a cognitive crisis in the creature's ancient mind. And in that crisis, something unprecedented began to emerge, curiosity about something other than hunting efficiency. For the first time in its existence, the Vorthak wanted to understand rather than simply consume. The human named Sarah was 3 levels deep into the station's most damaged section when the Vorthak finally revealed itself. She had just located the second group of survivors, a mixed crew of maintenance workers trapped in a collapsed engineering section, when the lights around her began to flicker and die one by one. "Well, that's not encouraging," she muttered, pulling out a portable illumination device. The small light cast dancing shadows on the twisted metal around her, and in those shadows, something massive began to move. When the Vorthak stepped into the light, Sarah's reaction was unlike anything the creature had experienced in 10 millennia of hunting. She didn't scream, didn't flee, didn't freeze in terror. Instead, she studied the massive predator with obvious curiosity, tilting her head slightly as she examined its alien features. "Oh," she said quietly, "you're the dangerous entity everyone's been talking about." She paused, apparently thinking about something. "You're really quite magnificent, actually. I've never seen anything like you before." The Vorthak found itself unable to process this response. Prey was supposed to recognize predators and react accordingly. Fear, aggression, or flight were the only logical responses to overwhelming threat. But this human was regarding the galaxy's most efficient killer with what appeared to be genuine appreciation for its aesthetic qualities. "You know," Sarah continued conversationally, apparently unaware that she was seconds away from death, "I bet you're hungry. Hunting takes a lot of energy, and you've been quite busy from what I've seen. I don't suppose you eat human food, but I've got some emergency rations that are supposed to work with most biochemistries." The creature's multiple eyes focused on the human with intense bewilderment. She was offering food to a predator that had been systematically killing everyone on the station. The behavior was so far beyond irrational that the Vorthak's tactical systems couldn't formulate a response. Sarah reached into her pack slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "I've got protein bars, nutrient paste, and some really good jerky that I picked up from a Tau Ceti trading post." "The jerky might be more your style. It's got a lot of concentrated protein and some interesting spices." She pulled out a wrapped package and held it toward the towering predator. "It's okay if you don't want it. I just thought you might be hungry, and sharing food is kind of a universal peace offering where I come from." The Vorthak stared at the offered package with complete cognitive paralysis. In its vast experience, prey offered food only as a last desperate attempt at appeasement, usually while begging for their lives. But this human's body language showed no signs of fear or desperation. She seemed genuinely concerned about the creature's nutritional status. When the Vorthak didn't immediately respond, Sarah set the package down between them and stepped back. "There you go. Take your time deciding. I know you probably don't trust me. We just met after all, and I'm sure you've had bad experiences with other species before." The words hit the creature like a physical blow. The human was expressing empathy for a being that had slaughtered her way across the galaxy, acknowledging that the Vorthak might have reasons for its hostility. No prey had ever attempted to understand the predator's perspective before. "You know what I think?" Sarah continued, settling down to sit cross-legged on the floor. "I think you're probably pretty lonely. I mean, when was the last time you had a conversation with someone who wasn't trying to kill you or running away screaming? That's got to be tough on anyone, even someone as strong as you." The Vorthak's ancient mind reeled under the implications of this statement. The human was suggesting that the creature might have emotional needs beyond basic survival requirements. The concept was so foreign that it took several seconds for the Vorthak's vast intellect to process the possibility. "I travel a lot for my job," Sarah said, apparently content to carry on a one-sided conversation with a galactic apex predator. "Cargo runs, take me all over the galaxy, and you meet lots of different people. But you know what I've learned? No matter what species they are, what they look like, or where they come from, everybody needs the same basic things: food, safety, and someone to talk to who actually listens." The Vorthak found itself lowering into a less aggressive posture, almost unconsciously responding to the human's calm, unthreatening behavior. For the first time in its existence, it was experiencing a social interaction that wasn't based on the predator-prey dynamic. "I bet you've got some amazing stories," Sarah continued. 10,000 years of traveling the galaxy? You must have seen things that would blow my mind. I'd love to hear about some of the places you've been, if you're willing to share." The creature's vocal apparatus, designed primarily for intimidating prey and coordinating hunts, struggled to form words appropriate for social conversation. When it finally spoke, its voice was a deep rumble that made the damaged station structure vibrate. "You are not afraid." Sarah smiled, the first human expression the Vorthak had ever seen directed toward itself. "Oh, I'm definitely scared. You're enormous, clearly very powerful, and I've seen what you're capable of. But being scared doesn't mean I have to be unfriendly. Fear and hostility are two different things." The distinction was revolutionary to the Vorthak's understanding. In its experience, fear always led to either aggressive retaliation or panicked flight. The concept that a being could acknowledge danger while choosing peaceful interaction was entirely new. "Why do you not flee?" the creature asked, genuinely curious about the answer. "Because there are still people trapped on this station who need help," Sarah replied simply. "And because running away wouldn't solve anything. If we're going to share this galaxy, we need to find ways to talk to each other." The Vorthak processed this statement with growing amazement. The human was suggesting that coexistence might be possible between predator and prey, between the galaxy's ultimate killing machine and the fragile beings it had spent millennia consuming. "I have destroyed entire civilizations," the creature said, testing whether this information would trigger the fear response it expected. "I know," Sarah replied sadly. "That must have been terrible for everyone involved. All that loss of life, all those unique cultures and perspectives gone forever. It makes me really sad to think about." The Vorthak's confusion deepened. The human was expressing sorrow not just for the victims, but for the loss that the destructions represented to the galaxy as a whole. She was viewing the creature's actions through a lens of tragedy rather than evil, suggesting that even the predator's victims represented valuable losses. "You mourn for my prey?" the creature asked. "Of course. Every life has value. Every culture has something unique to offer. When civilizations die, we all lose something important." Sarah paused, looking directly at the Vorthak with an expression of surprising compassion. "But I also feel sorry for you. Carrying all that death around must be incredibly heavy. No wonder you're angry at the universe." The concept that the Vorthak might be suffering as a result of its own actions was so revolutionary that the creature's mental processes momentarily stopped functioning entirely. In its understanding, predators killed and prey died. There were no emotional consequences for the hunter, no psychological burden associated with successful hunts. But as the human's words penetrated its consciousness, the Vorthak began to recognize something it had never acknowledged before: a deep, persistent emptiness that had grown with each civilization it had consumed. Every successful hunt had eliminated not just prey, but potential interactions, possible relationships, opportunities for the kind of connection it was experiencing now. "I am," the creature began, then stopped, lacking words for emotions it was only beginning to recognize. Lonely? Sarah suggested gently. Tired? Confused about what you really want? The accuracy of her observations was startling. The Vorthak realized that its endless hunting might not have been driven by hunger or territorial instinct, but by a desperate search for something it couldn't name. Every civilization it destroyed took away the possibility of finding that unnamed need fulfilled. I do not understand you, the creature admitted, its voice carrying vulnerability that surprised them both. That's okay, Sarah said warmly. I don't really understand me either sometimes. Understanding is something that happens gradually between friends, and I'd like to be your friend if you're interested. The word friend created cascades of new neural pathways in the Vorthak's ancient brain. Friendship was a concept it had observed among prey species, but never considered applicable to itself. The idea that it might form voluntary, mutually beneficial relationships rather than simply hunting and consuming was transformative. Friends do not hunt friends, the creature said slowly, working through the implications. That's right. Friends help each other, share things they enjoy, and try to make each other's lives better. It's much more fun than hunting, once you get used to it. The Vorthak looked down at the package of food the human had offered, seeing it now as something more than sustenance. It was a gesture of trust, an invitation to relationship, a bridge between two radically different forms of life. Carefully, using claws designed for rending flesh to delicately unwrap processed meat, the creature tasted human food for the first time. The flavors were complex and interesting, enhanced by spices that created pleasant sensations rather than simply providing nutrition. Do you like it? Sarah asked, watching the galaxy's most feared predator experience jerky with obvious enjoyment. It is good, the Vorthak admitted. The flavors are more complex than simple protein. Spices make everything better. I've got about 20 different varieties in my ship's galley. If you'd like, I could show you how to prepare food that tastes good instead of just providing energy. The offer to learn something new, to engage in creative activity rather than destructive hunting, represented a fundamental shift in the Vorthak's existence. For 10,000 years, it had focused solely on becoming a more efficient killer. The possibility of developing other skills, other interests, other ways of interacting with the universe opened up vistas of experience it had never imagined. There are still survivors trapped on this station, Sarah said gently. People who are scared and hurt and need help. I was hoping to rescue them before their life support runs out. The Vorthak understood the implication. The human was giving it a choice between its old pattern of hunting and a new possibility of helping. The decision would define what kind of being it chose to become. I could assist with this rescue, the creature said slowly. My knowledge of the station's structure is comprehensive. Sarah's face lit up with genuine joy. That would be wonderful. You know where everyone is hiding, don't you? You could guide us to them safely, and your strength would make clearing debris much easier. The transformation from predator to protector felt strange but oddly satisfying. Using its tracking abilities to locate frightened survivors instead of victims, applying its strength to rescue rather than destroy, working alongside the human instead of hunting her, each action created new neural patterns that felt surprisingly positive. The rescue operation that followed was unlike anything in the Vorthak's experience. Working together, they reached the trapped maintenance workers and used the creature's immense strength to clear collapsed passages. Sarah provided medical treatment and emotional support, while the Vorthak handled heavy lifting and navigation. The survivors' initial terror at seeing their station's destroyer was gradually replaced by amazement as they realized the creature was helping them escape. Dr. Venna, reunited with her colleagues, expressed wonder at the transformation. How did you convince it to help us? She asked Sarah privately. I didn't convince it of anything, Sarah replied. I just offered friendship and let it decide what kind of being it wanted to be. Turns out, underneath all that predator programming, it's just someone who's been alone for way too long. When they reached the final group of survivors, the last 3 beings trapped in a sealed section with failing life support, the Vorthak found itself experiencing something entirely new, urgency driven not by hunger, but by concern for others' welfare. "The atmospheric seals are failing," it reported to Sarah. "We have perhaps 10 minutes before the environment becomes lethal." Working with desperate efficiency, they broke through multiple barriers and reached the survivors just as their oxygen ran critical. The Vorthak carried 2 unconscious beings while Sarah supported a third, racing through corridors toward the emergency pods. When the last escape pod launched successfully, carrying all the station's survivors to safety, the Vorthak experienced its first taste of satisfaction, derived from preservation rather than destruction. The feeling was addictive in a way that hunting had never been. "We did it," Sarah said, breathing heavily from exertion. "Everyone's safe. Everyone's going to make it home to their families." The creature looked around the empty station that had been the site of its latest hunt, seeing it now through different eyes. Instead of a successful killing ground, it appeared to be a place where something remarkable had happened, where an ancient predator had discovered the possibility of connection, purpose, and friendship. "What happens now?" the Vorthak asked. Sarah grinned. "Now we go back to my ship. I teach you how to make really good coffee, and we figure out where the galaxy needs a reformed apex predator who wants to help instead of hunt. Trust me, there are lots of dangerous situations out there that could use someone with your skills working for the good guys." The concept of being a good guy was revolutionary. But as the Vorthak followed its new friend back to her battered cargo ship, it felt something it had never experienced before. Hope. Hope that its vast strength could be used to protect rather than destroy. Hope that its accumulated knowledge could serve life rather than death. Hope that the loneliness of 10,000 years was finally over. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Sarah chattering about modification plans to accommodate her new friend's size and dietary requirements, the Vorthak realized that it had found something more valuable than any prey it had ever hunted. It had found purpose, friendship, and a future that stretched beyond endless cycles of destruction. The galaxy's ultimate predator had died in that damaged station. What emerged was something new, a protector, a friend, and proof that even the most feared monsters could choose to become something better when offered the simple gifts of food, friendship, and hope. In the cargo bay where their unlikely partnership had begun, a small wrapped package lay forgotten on the floor, the first peace offering between 2 radically different forms of life, and the beginning of a friendship that would reshape both their destinies among the stars.